Hi, I'm Sherry-Ann A., and I teach Honors Biotechnology at Brebeuf Jesuit. My presentation today is Who Are You? Authenticity in Teaching as a Means of Technology Integration. One of the reasons I was selected to discuss blending learning with you is because I am not on the cutting edge of technology in terms of the use of apps, etc. in my classroom, although I'd argue that the content and equipment in my biotech class is cutting edge. It can be inspirational but difficult to attend a technology conference and learn about the vast array of exciting possibilities, but also overwhelming in terms of knowing, where do I begin? I represent someone who uses a small amount of technology, but not because I reject it. Rather, I evaluate its usefulness and then decide whether or not it will enhance the learning experience. To gain more insight about this, let's turn to Parker Palmer. I read his book The Courage to Teach in the late 90s, and it transformed the way I thought about teaching. Pause the video to read his words. Palmer further elaborates here. Again, please pause the video. As you can see, Palmer's discussion of choosing a technique that manifests more fully the gift of self is a hallmark of a Jesuit educator. As you explore technology integration, be ever aware of your own personhood. Don't use technology for the sake of using it. Rather, make sure the technique nurtures your teacher heart and provides a meaningful learning experience for your students. Based on Palmer's thoughts, it's important for you to know who I am so as to better understand my use of technology in the biotech curriculum. So here I am. Most people would call me a nerd. This is my license plate. The car is affectionately known as the Biomobile. There are many reasons I love this license plate, but one in particular is that bio means life, and I think we ought to seize it. My favorite pair of shoes, my favorite scarf. If you come to my house on Halloween, this pumpkin would greet you. It's also important to know I'm a parent, and ever since my son was born, just like his mother, he's loved science, and this has continued through the years. Just like every child, he has his own stuffed DNA molecule. I've been fortunate to work with some and meet some pretty amazing scientists. This is Dr. Tahir, the first person to isolate DNA from the back of a wristwatch, from the cells on a wristwatch, chewing gum, and toothbrush. He was vital in helping us identify the remains of people who unfortunately passed away when the Twin Towers fell in September of 2001. I've had the chance also to meet Dr. Mario Capecchi, Nobel Prize-winning scientist, as well as Dr. James Watson, the co-discoverer of DNA. I've had many biotech adventures. Here's a mere sampling. One is visiting Tiger Building number 5 in Rockville, Maryland, where they did a lot of the sequencing of the human genome. The 4 colors on the windows represent the 4 colors of DNA used in automated sequencing. Here's my favorite staircase, which is at the Eccles Institute in Salt Lake. And then, of course, I had to pull out my jazz hands when I was at Yellowstone last year because I was at the place where a special enzyme was discovered that allowed PCR to work, which is Nobel Prize-winning technology of making many, many copies of DNA. I love and adore my students. I'm playful with them. Enjoy their taking selfies of us, which is new over the past couple of years, of course. Here, students are doing the double helix, which is a dance move I taught them. And I also love nurturing relationships with alumni that I've taught over the years. Here's a picture from the spring when I visited Boston for a science conference when I was in Nerdvana, and I was able to round up 9 former students and we met for dinner. I did the same thing a week later in Washington, D.C. Now that you know who I am, it should offer perspective on my choices of techniques. In 2003, I created Honors Biotechnology, a lab-intensive course that incorporates use of modern technology to learn scientific principles and techniques. There is no textbook or standardized curriculum, so what drives my curriculum choices? My biotech adventures have exposed me to many different types of technology, which have greatly enhanced the course, but that doesn't mean I've incorporated every type into the curriculum. I encourage you to ask yourself, are there certain types of technology that are imperative for students to use in my discipline? If so, then we ought to feel compelled to integrate them. So in my case, for example, if I'm going to introduce new content and the only thing we can do is a paper simulation, then I'm likely not going to choose that as part of the course. We must utilize modern technology when teaching a biotechnology course. This adds relevance to students' lives, and ultimately I want to create informed citizens. I'm going to have some students who will go on and major in science, and of course I want them to have a basic foundation of science, but ultimately all of my students need to become informed citizens. So when they open the newspaper and they read about genetically modified foods, they can say, hey, not only do I understand genetically modified foods, I've tested to see if they're present. So when you look at the uses of technology in my classes, you can see that they become useful and relevant learning tools. For example, here students are loading a horizontal gel, here a vertical gel. Here they are using a spectrophotometer. Now, one of many examples of a relevant lesson plan is this. In January, I went on a sushi adventure where I ordered nigiri, ordered 2 pieces so that I would eat one and then bring the other piece back to the lab. In lab, we isolated the DNA, and then we ran PCR, which again is that Nobel Prize winning technology that allows us to make lots and lots of copies of the DNA, and then we loaded that into a gel to verify that indeed we had made copies of DNA. Then we sent that sample off to California to be sequenced. When we got that, we grabbed that sequence and we analyzed it to see if the fish had been mislabeled, which commonly happens in the United States. And so what did I really eat that day? We found out. Another way we think about technology integration is in terms of the delivery of content. Perhaps an iPad is necessary if you want students to learn a certain app, or perhaps a tablet is useful when wanting to draw and record the illustration. But ought we use these for the sake of using them? No. Every once in a while I still use an overhead. It's not uncommon for students to say, Mrs. Ane, you are the only teacher who uses an overhead. To which I respond, it's about using the proper tool for the job. There are times when I could merely use a tablet to accomplish the same learning objective, yet with the overhead I didn't have to worry about connectivity issues. I can face my students while watching them. Now, as a science teacher, I have inspiration and evidence in my claim that simple tools can be effective learning tools. So let's look at the left. Do you see that picture? Anyone know where I'm standing? A world-famous lab in England. Notice I'm doing the double helix. On the right is a big hint. I'm holding my limited edition of these 2 scientists. That's right, Watson and Crick. In the 1950s, in order for them to best understand and figure out the structure of DNA and then communicate that to the world, what did they do? They built a model. No fancy technology, they built a model. I also use technology to provide a variety of learning experiences. For example, my students will construct a paper model of DNA. Now, why do they do that? Well, first I want them to have the kinesthetic experience and then also basic understanding, but this isn't enough. And so this would be an example of where we would go online and students would explore a simulation of DNA, giving them a better understanding of the 3-dimensional shape of DNA. Another example is in my biotech blog, where I keep a daily record of class activities. I've been doing this since 2007. Each lab has its own page devoted to it, so students essentially have pictures and a built-in study guide for each lab, but then also reflections. So when students watch a film, let's say about a bioethical issue, they would go to this page and then ultimately record their thoughts about this in the form of a reflection. And so students are getting experience posting thoughts online in a public forum. Also,
I know that not all students learn the same. Now, I don't give a lot of notes in class, but I do still give a traditional PowerPoint. I try not to make it last more than 15 or 20 minutes, but I do that because I know some students need to write down notes, and that's the way they learn best. Others need to sit back and listen and soak it in, while others will pull out their laptop and look at the notes I've posted on Edline and type in their own annotation to those notes. And so posting notes online allows students to make those sort of learning decisions. Now, in terms of cell phone use, I have decided to tackle this with I allow students to have a cell phone in the class. I believe we ought to teach proper etiquette. And so by telling them to put them away, really doesn't give me an opportunity to do that. Also, it's proven to be a great tool in the lab as a timer and so on. Also, what I love is that students will say, oh, I'm going to take a picture of my lab and post it on Instagram or send it to my mom or my friends. And why in the heck would I ever want to deny them that opportunity to be excited about science and share it with people? It's also a means of communication between the student and I. It's not uncommon for them to text me with a question. I also utilize Twitter. Now keep in mind, I told you who I am, and so my use of Twitter reflects that. I tend to celebrate, I will use the word celebrate, my nerdiness with tweets. So in other words, I don't use this as a reminder that there's a quiz tomorrow. I'm also celebrating what my students are doing in class. And then also it gives me an opportunity to celebrate their accomplishments outside of the classroom. And so I'm acknowledging, for example, a soccer player who scored. It gives me a great way to do that publicly and then also in the classroom to say, hey, Jake, you did a great job. I also use Skype. Now, I started a Skype seminar series with alumni, Brebeuf alumni, who are in some sort of science field. And so it's been a lovely way for my students to connect with Brebeuf alumni who are out there in the world, not just in science fields, but making the world a better place, being men and women for others. And so that's proven to be quite powerful. They get to ask the alumni different questions about their paths and so on. Now, one thing I want to highlight and come back to really is ultimately let's not forget the value of the power of the traditional paper and pencil. Here on the left I gave a traditional paper quiz last spring, and you can see where a girl changed. I just had my last name, and you can see where she's changed that into expressing her sentiment, and it allowed me a way to interact with her. And we could do this potentially in a digital fashion, but it's in our own handwriting. And then you can see also on the right here where students in May hand wrote a note for my birthday. And so there's still value in the paper and pencil. Now remember Palmer's words as you discern which techniques are best suited for you and your students. And ultimately, I'll leave you with this. Hold true to being authentic, loving what you do, and most importantly, those you teach. Thank you.